Just waiting for a slide. Here we go. So good to be back up here. I'm presenting a project that relates with my previous position as the longtime executive director of public architecture. I've recently moved on from public architecture. I'm the new president and CEO of Next American City. So I'm not speaking for public architecture, but I'm instead representing this book project that in fact involved many people in this room. And so I think it's a fitting audience, and I think it's a subject matter that really can help advance this idea of social sustainability. So as you might recall, if anyone was at the 2006 summit, I was pitching this very new and young idea of pledging 1% of one's time to pro bono service. And at that conference, at subsequent summits, and in many, many other settings, big firms, small firms, and many in between stepped up and pledged 1% of their time to pro bono service. And over the course of the 5 years that I was directing that program, we managed to recruit over 750 firms. My pro bono projects are my favorite projects. And it was something that I would hear time and time again from everyone involved, both from the firm provider side as well as the client side. And so Paula and her team came up with a great framework that I think really celebrates the other very unique part of this book. For each one of the 40 projects that are profiled, we have equal voices of the client and of the architect. So we interviewed both the client and users for these projects as well as the actual designers, and we ran their narrative side by side. The wide column that, of course, you can't read is the client perspective, and the narrow column is the architect perspective. And these are just a couple of the sample spreads. The book is broken up into 6 categories, and those categories are aligned with the general breakdown of the nonprofit sector as well as the expressed interests of most major foundations. So it's arts, civic, community, education, health, and housing. The projects hail from 27 cities and 17 states, and Nebraska is actually represented a couple times in here. A bunch of projects from other big cities that you might expect, and again, many in between. And so I wanted to just roll through a few of these projects and identify a few themes that have come up. The first one is around this idea of purpose. One of the most compelling narratives that I heard from an architect side was actually from Bill Sharples at Shop Architects. And this is one of the most progressive design firms in the country. They're very much associated with high design, and yet he spoke in the most beautiful terms about this project that they had been involved with in Pass Christian, Mississippi. And this was a town on the Gulf Coast that was wiped away by Hurricanes Katrina and Rita. And Bill and his partners were called down there just 2 days after the storm. And they were told by somebody who had recently become a client of theirs, essentially, were told, we need your services down here right now. And they assembled a team of people to go work on site, to actually be on site for many, many weeks at a time, and to come together to develop what is basically was a town square. All the program that had been wiped away, from the hair salon to the restaurants to the social service agencies, laundromat, everything was assembled into this one building with this huge roof structure overhead. And again, this is a very sophisticated design firm, and due to the shortage of materials as well as labor, they ended up employing a contractor that had only ever built 7-Eleven stores, and they built a shop project. It's pretty amazing. All happened on a pro bono basis. Another thing that arose is this idea of raising expectations. So often when we go into the DMV or a dentist's office or doctor's office or whatever it is, we expect them to be drab, uninspiring spaces. Well, you can imagine for people that are relying on health clinics, free clinics and otherwise, the ability of us to make them feel comfortable, to make them feel valued, is all the more important. And so there's a residential architecture firm in San Francisco that's been working with Golden Gate Community Health, a series of health centers across the Bay Area, in order to make these centers more beautiful and more livable. This is a project that's actually the largest scale project in the book. It was a fee-generating project at almost every level, but all the partners involved with Chan Krieger and BBJ donated their time to the tune of about $300,000. And talking with them as well as talking with the client, which is the Greater Boston Area Food Bank, a major food distribution center that services 3 states, we began to see that they were blurring this line between the servers and the served. They were really becoming part of the team. They were becoming advocates for this mission that the food bank represents, and they've got a remarkable facility to show for it. And Chan Krieger MBBJ remains involved on a pro bono basis, consulting with the facility as it grows. This is one that I showed yesterday. It's one of my, or actually this morning I should say, one of my favorites. And I think it represents this ripple effect. There's this, it's the result of a major public-private partnership between the City of New York and the Robin Hood Foundation of New York, and they are focused on eradicating poverty, but they identified literacy as a major contributor to poverty, and so they set about redesigning some of the lowest performing New York public school libraries, all on a pro bono basis. Again, it wasn't just architects and designers donating their time, it was contractors, material manufacturers, publishers, and others. And these are just little architectural gems within some of the most blighted parts of New York. Really amazing projects. I think the last 2 or 3 projects that I have are from the same firm. The first is associated with Gensler's Houston office, and it was actually referred to me by Delegate Reeves-Taylor. And they initially were approached by the founder of KIPP Charter Schools, the now just Power Charter Network. And this is an entity that said, hey, we've got to open the doors for this school. It can't cost much. We're focused on education. We don't really care about environment. And the designers, architects, and team members at Gensler in Houston really made through their proposals as well as other illustrations, they made KIPP a believer in good design. And so their subsequent schools have really elevated the role of design. And so in addition to a large-scale project like this, one of the largest firms in the country, Gensler, is also associated with one of the smallest projects in the book. This is the series of what they call eco-cabins. They are little shipping containers that have been reconfigured to become cabins on for a Boy Scout camp off the coast of Southern California. And for many of these kids, this is the first and sometimes only time that they leave Los Angeles or leave the cities where they're from, and they get to come and experience nature, and they see this ability of architecture and design to tread lightly on the land, but also provide a really unique environment for them. And I wanted to especially highlight Perkins and Will. I mentioned them earlier and talked about their social responsibility initiative. This is actually an amazing project that predated that SRI program, but this was one of 2 prototype hospital rooms that are in the University of Minnesota Children's Hospital, and they basically were approached by a nonprofit organization called Adopt a Room that's working to get hospital rooms to be more family-friendly, more patient-friendly, and more livable for the extended periods of time that people are in there. And so you see things like this office where parents can pay bills, catch up on work, that kind of thing. But also there's a great deal of attention paid to every other detail in these spaces. And then I also mentioned earlier the Make It Right work down in New Orleans, and this idea of building community. They pretty much had a blank slate, and they've engaged some of the most high-profile architects in the world, as well as some great firms in New Orleans to rebuild this community from scratch. And so finally, in closing, I just want to say one additional thing, that this idea of social sustainability, I think, really has legs. I think there's a huge appetite for it, both among your clients, but also among your employees. And I think that that now's a really great time for that. And this book is full of examples of pro bono projects that show what's possible. I was really taken by a line that Ray Anderson borrowed from Amory Lovins, and it's this idea that if it exists, then it's possible. And there were people in my recent presentation in Minneapolis that said, not all of our pro bono projects can look like that, and I just ask why, or why not. I really think that they can. So finally, to conclude, I'll just read an excerpt from this book. Spaces can enliven, they can excite the soul, fill us with a sense of wonder, and bring us comfort and reprieve. When planned with their ultimate users in mind, spaces can be more than bricks and mortar and glass and steel. They become incubators for serving, working, learning, and loving. This is what architecture is all about, providing spaces that empower people to live their best lives. Thank you.